Welcome back to DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast. Just the two of us this week, as you all know, Ellie's been on her travels, so it's unfortunately busy this week. We hope she'll be back for next week's episode, but just me and Archie for this week, and we're going to give you a little roundup of all the silly season stories of who could go where in 2025 and sort of the entire driver market picture, team by team. We're sort of getting to that city stage just after August 1st, which is the point that many people can start speaking to other teams in the driver market. And expect over the next 2 or 3 months of the market to sort of be finalised. So we're going to give you updates of what we've heard from various different sources, and at the end we'll make our own predictions towards the 2025 driver market. Now I know it's a bit unusual because you're listening to this week's episode, but if you haven't listened to last week's episode, we had a special feature-length episode with Chip Ganassi Racing's Kyffin Simpson. It's the first time Kiffin's spoken to any sort of media in this form, and we got 45 minutes of Kyffin to speak about various different topics: his junior career life in the Cayman Islands, Instagram call-ups to Le Mans, and loads of different stories. Kyffin was really interesting with that. Absolutely loads from him, and it's a driver you probably don't really know too much about for the average fan. I know we certainly didn't. So if you want to learn a bit more about Kyffin, please listen to that episode, because it is, I think, one of the best episodes you've had this year, in truth. So if you haven't checked that already, please do. But let's get focused on this episode in 2025, and there's a lot to delve into as there was last year. It's not quite as messy as last year, but I don't think it's certainly as stable.
Yeah, we kind of have two teams, you would say, that are certainly kind of stable. One of which we've not been able to say that they've been particularly stable for a while, but Arrow McLaren, with obviously Pato O'Ward, Nolan Siegel, Christian Lundgaard, they look like the other one who are kind of set in stone. So yeah, there's not really much to say on those two, but I think in terms of the wider market, it's just, I think, a case of too many drivers for too few seats, even though it is a 27 at least car field. You've got kind of a group of sort of Alexander Rossi, David Malukas, Rinus VeeKay, maybe Teo Pourchaire, who would go in a selection of sort of better, quote unquote, seats that seems to be available. But then you've kind of got a secondary gaggle of like Louis Foster, obviously runaway Indy NXT championship leader at the moment, possibly Linus Lundqvist and Marcus Armstrong, who might be hit by the charter agreement causing Chip Ganassi Racing to downsize, as we'll come on to. You've got kind of wild cards from Formula 2 or the Formula 1 ladder in Zay Maloney, who's tested with Rahal Letterman-Lanigan, and Logan Sargeant, obviously, whether he decides to come to IndyCar or not. So there's a lot of unknowns, and then obviously playing into all of this is the big age-old factor of budget, and what teams will ultimately be forced to have a driver who pays for that seat because they simply can't afford to have a driver coming in that they can pay, or that doesn't bring massive sponsorship, for instance. You've got other possibilities such as Devlin DiFrancesco, who comes with money. There's just so many drivers for so few seats. You look at Indy NXT, you've got Hunter McElroy. Obviously, he made his debut with Coyne. He graduated last year. Jacob Abel, Jamie Chadwick. Ed Carpenter Racing have Josh Pearson as a development driver. He's not quite shown enough yet. You've got your Toby Soweries, your Catherine Lace, your Luca Giottos from kind of the Coyne group. You've just got so much. You've got some who probably will miss out as well. You've got, thinking of Pietro Fittipaldi, if he loses his seat, Jack Harvey, Connor Daly, Augustine Canapino, who might be gone. It is chaotic as always, isn't it?
It is.
I think our predictions here will be mostly based off just logic and some vibes, really, because it all seems up in the air, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a good problem to have, right? The issue is you've got your funnel of Indy NXT drivers, you've got your funnel of this growing market of F2 drivers and F1 drivers who are looking at interest. And then you have the current crop, the veterans, your likes of Daly, your likes of Rossi's not quite the same ball, but the likes of Daly, for example, who have been in the series, like Harvey, for example, for several years. And I'm sure team owners know, but we obviously don't know the ins and outs of the charter agreement, and that's sort of the same as Prema. We expect it to be 3 charters per team, but where you don't know that fully, it adds an extra element to it. I'm sure, obviously, we'll give you the details once we know that. but it just leaves a little bit of a question mark in many regards. I mean, where do we start? So that Aaron McLaren looked pretty stable with O'Ward, Siegel, and Lundgaard. We never quite know of that team. But,
yeah, I guess Andretti are probably the next.
I was about to say, Andretti, you probably could say Herta, Kirkwood, and Ericsson are locked in. They've shown no interest in upsizing. They've shown no interest in downsizing. Obviously, Marco will probably be there for the 500 as well. The sort of question mark around them remains what do they do with Jamie Chadwick, who was announced a couple of weeks ago, which we haven't covered in the podcast. She's going to test at Barber in, I believe it's late September. She'll be doing that test. And there's a lot of arguing, what do you do with her? Andretti have said, even for her, we're not going to expand. There's no benefit for us to expand to accommodate Chadwick. But they want her in almost like a satellite entry. Now, I don't know if we've told you this, but the Meyer Shank Andretti alliance looks to be heading towards the Meyer Shank Ganassi alliance. That's unconfirmed. That's only rumours. We're only spreading what we've seen. But the Andretti Shank partnership looks to be ending. So they can't place Chadwick there, for example. So they need to find a satellite entry if they did want Chadwick in a seat somewhere. I mean, where do you go? There's not the market, but that's the only question mark which surrounds Andretti at the minute.
Yeah, I think both because of the saturation of this driver market, and she's fifth in the standings, and maybe she could be even better off if it wasn't for kind of those errant first few rounds where she had a few mistakes, but mostly she's just had a lot of bad luck through the year in Indy NXT. But she could benefit maybe from one more year. I think you don't want to rush Chadwick up to IndyCar, especially when you've got her Andretti Indy NXT teammate Louis Foster, who seems kind of much more ready. I feel he would be the one that you'd want to put your efforts into at this present moment. I think it'd be great to see Jamie Chadwick in IndyCar, but you want it to happen at the right time, I think. And obviously, like with the way the charter appears from, again, we're kind of just aggregating all of this from what we've read from other people, but like it's essentially if you are running more than 3 cars, it looks like the field will be capped at 27, and any team that decides to run more than 3 will ultimately kind of risk having to bump their way into races rather than, I mean, yeah, it's a bit confusing. We'll kind of, when it becomes official, whenever it may become official, it seems like it will happen. We'll kind of break it down for you because I imagine a lot of people are kind of confused. But if teams have sort of entries that aren't sort of associated with a charter, which I think there's been kind of reports that maybe there'll be 25 charters or something for 27 cars, which is when you get into the situation if you then have a 28 car field for a field that they're saying can't be any bigger than 27 for a regular season race. That's when you might have bumping at St. Pete or at Barber, which I think teams won't want to run that risk ultimately. So yeah, that's Andretti's stable in its lineup. It's just kind of what happens to their junior drivers. And we'll maybe get onto in a bit what may happen with Foster.
But I mean, where does Chadwick go? Because if you lose a Shank alliance, they've got to put her somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, they put Kirkwood at Foyt, didn't they? A few years back.
Yeah, I mean, there's also rumours they might move to a Chevy engine. That won't happen next year. But that's another question mark. Okay, they want to do anything. I mean, there's so many question marks. I mean, look, I don't think Chadwick's. She's not ready, but like, there's other people who deserve the seat over her, and I think there wouldn't be a problem with her doing another year of next and stepping up because, from her standpoint, it'll make her look a lot more valuable as an Indy NXT champion or vice champion than a 5th place where, oh, hang on, is it the fact that she's female, she's getting this cooler? So the argument almost is if she waits another year, she's got more to justify. And, the market might not be so volatile in a year's time. You might have a more calmer market. I know IndyCar driving markets, particularly calm. But there might be opportunities next year where there isn't this year. Is it worth the risk stepping her up? She's out of her depth and she's gone after a year. Or is it just worth sticking her in Indy NXT where the market is volatile and let her step up in 2026?
Agreed. It's probably worth getting onto Ganassi and Shank now, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, Ganassi, Probably, well, they're not the most difficult because
they're gonna get hit hardest by the charter,
Yeah.
it seems, because we know that Alex Palou and Scott Dixon they're going to be there regardless. They are they're two guys.
Because the fifth car this year was a bit, whoa, that is excessive to run 5 cars full time. And that's what we do about the third car. Looks like it's going to be Simpson on the basis, because he brings the funding and he's the one that the team have supported for years and years. Armstrong, I think this year's been okay. He's had peaks, but he's been rather inconsistent. And he's still learning ovals this year, for example. But Palou won the championship the second season, his first with Ganassi, and Armstrong, without sounding harsh, doesn't have the early traits of a top-level IndyCar driver. Lundqvist is a bit of a harder one because he's a rookie. And he's had peaks. He's had the podium at Barber. He had that pole at Road America. But it's been even worse from a consistency standpoint as Armstrong. We know he's got the potential, but he hasn't got really that execution so far. So it looks like both of them have been dropped. And it's where do they go? After that, I feel there's more opportunity for Lundqvist than there is Armstrong, just because he proved himself on the road to IndyCar. And, he proved his worth at Shank last year, and he has had those peaks. He's a bit more of a risk, but looks like they're going to have to downsize to 3 on the basis of the charter, and that will be Palou, Dixon, and then likely Simpson.
Yeah, I mean, this is coming from Marshall Pruitt. Often does sort of silly season updates for racers. So a lot of this is kind of what he has suggested, that it will be Simpson, and it makes sense because that's ultimately racing as a business. And yeah, he's been the worst performing Ganassi car statistically, and that's just how it is. But because he kind of supports the team so much and his family do that makes sense, and it's simply just unfortunate for Armstrong and Lundqvist. I feel like Armstrong, we've seen he has the pace. He's been consistently up there in qualifying. It's just things haven't gone his way necessarily in races, and that's not always been his fault. I still think he's a worthy IndyCar driver, and likewise with Lundqvist, he's been inconsistent. He's a rookie though. We've seen the podium, we've seen the pole. He's quick. We know he's quick. We've seen it in Indy NXT. You think if they are going to sort of ally with Maya Shank, as is kind of being reported in a lot of places now, is that a chance to maybe ship out Armstrong and Lundqvist to keep on their books? But as we'll get onto straight after this, Maya Shank probably have better options, to be quite honest, in what they've already got. And it could ultimately, with the kind of just saturation of the amount of drivers that are, at the end of the day, interested in seats, that one of these two or both of these two might end up without a drive. And there's great options elsewhere. There's Formula E, there's IMSA, but it would be really unfortunate because I feel like both definitely deserve to be in the field still. It's harsh. I mean, did Ganassi see the charter coming? I mean, they can't have done if they decided to kind of put the resources into expanding to 5 cars. And now they're going to lose that almost instantly. But then kind of just segue into Maya Shank, I guess. I mean, I don't see a reason for them. I know it's been reported elsewhere that Malukas has offers from a lot of places, and you'll understand that after kind of the displays he's put in so quickly after coming back from his wrist injury. But Rosenqvist obviously will still be there. I think for Malukas, Maya Shank makes the most sense because we've seen how much they've thrived with this upturn that Andretti have had this year. They're going to the superior Honda team, and you can imagine it'll only get better. And that is a chance for Rosenqvist to kind of reunite with Ganassi, where it was probably an error to leave Ganassi. I think they would have loved to keep hold of him, from what people have kind of suggested back when he left Ferrari and McLaren. So there's a chance for that relationship to be rekindled. And I think for Malukas, it's in his best interest to stay with Maya Shank, and maybe for the continuity in their side to keep Malukas. But at the same time, it's going to be a sought-after seat if they do indeed kind of pair up with Ganassi, because you've got the likes, as I mentioned, of Rinus VeeKay, of Alexander Rossi. What if Ganassi are interested in Teo Pourchaire, for instance? So this is where you have these few attractive seats here, Foyt, Prema, possibly RLL, where you've got sort of a selection of drivers that it feels like they could land anywhere. We don't have the kind of intel as to what may happen. to be honest, I think it is, as you said, so volatile, but no one really knows what's going to happen. I think, do Meyer Shank need funding? If so, Malukas, HMD, that could support that as well. I don't know. But yeah, anything could happen there.
Yeah, I mean, from a performance standpoint, I think Malukas is in the best seat that he's got. It's the best option for Shank, I think, for Malukas, because, he's performed well so far. But then money talks, you're right? What happens if he gets a big offer from, let's say, RLL, or let's say he gets a big offer from Prema? That's going to be an incentive to get out the door at Shank. So, Malukas is in a good position where he's come back from his injury and he's sort of proved, I'm still ready, I'm still competitive. There were rumours maybe Ganassi field driver for Shank. Could they up it to 3? I mean, if it's Ganassi operated, the logic makes sense. Let's say we put a Lundqvist in there, but I don't think.
I think I saw a quote in Racer from Mike Shank saying that wasn't going to happen.
Right. So, I mean, the theory makes sense if it was going to happen, because then at least Ganassi could have somebody in the Shank position. But Lucas makes the most sense alongside Rosenqvist. So, but again, there's options. You could really pick anyone here. You could pick Rossi, for example, or you could pick a Pourchaire, or you could pick someone like Foster. It's hard to say, but I think Malukas is probably in prime position as we speak. But, as I said, he could get an offer from RLL and go there. So, we don't know. Exactly. We don't have anything.
Should we get onto RLL?
No, we'll get onto RLL's the message from, right? I think Graham's
so.
Locked in.
I think, to be honest, I think realistically, Ray Hall's locked in, and they wouldn't have kept hold of Yuri Vips if they didn't have the intention off the back of his sort of impressive test outings, you could say, last year in place of that, Jack Harvey back end of last year. They wouldn't have kept hold of him. They wouldn't have given him the sim time. He wouldn't have been around the paddock if they weren't going to kind of have him in that, presumably the 45. I don't know exactly which way they'll do it, but yeah, it's the other RLL car that's very up in the air.
Yeah, as you said, they've like for a year now, they've shown how much they really like Yuri Vips, and there was rumours that he might be in a 4th car at some point this year. I mean, I guess it still theoretically could be, but it's not announced. But yeah, they would have kept him on their books if they weren't interested. Fittipaldi's, let's be honest, hasn't had a great year. I know the team overall haven't had a particularly good year. But out of the 3 of them, Fittipaldi's obviously been the one with the most struggle so far. Lundgaard's gone, obviously. And as you said, Vips has got to be on there. He's got to be in contention. I think they're pretty interesting Pourchaire. There's been a sort of statement. He's been around Indianapolis a lot. We know the team is sort of based in that area. So I feel Pourchaire's in a good position. As we said, they might invest in someone like Malukas, for example, if they wanted to do that. They've tested Zane Maloney in Indianapolis, which is ironic after we asked Kiffin about his friendship with Zane last week. And he said that they wanted to race together, so a chance might come. But you don't do tests for absolutely no reason. I mean, I know tests, you can't read them too much. But he's one who's obviously looking around. I think Gabriel Bortoletto was one also briefly mentioned as one looking over, but Maloney seems a bit more concrete than Bortoletto does at the minute. But yeah, I feel Maloney, Malukas, again, Rossi might be quite a good one, but you've also got the experience that Graham brings into the team, so do you really need 2 real experienced heads and then just one sort of less experienced head? I mean, you'd have to fork out quite a bit for Rossi, you'd think. Do they take a risk on someone like VeeKay, for example? It's hard to say. It's hard to say. There's quite a few good contenders. But when you're looking at a team dynamic, I think someone like Pourchaire would be quite good. He's got a bit of experience. He's been with another team, but he's not like a veteran either. I feel having 2 veterans might be a bit iffy almost.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of just having to put jigsaw pieces together here from all the information that we see circulating in various articles and all over Twitter. What do you believe? What do you not believe? But I think from more concrete stuff, RLL clearly have a liking for Formula 2 drivers. Lundgaard excelled then what do they go and do? They go and bring Vips on board, which is kind of what makes me think, especially given they've now tested Zay Maloney as well. It just makes me feel like Pourchaire would really make sense for them. We know that obviously he's not like Lundgaard coming over, no experience of ovals, but RLL have shown to have a pretty decent road and street course package over the last year or so, which just makes me think it would be a good landing spot for Pourchaire. I seem to remember reading a report soon after I think it was after he must have lost his McLaren drive, that he'd had a tour of the RLL facility. It might have been earlier than that. I can't remember, but that would make sense to me. But a lot of things would make sense. Rinus VeeKay would make sense. Malukas, if they offered kind of something for him, would make sense. Armstrong, he's from the F2 school. He would make sense. Rossi would make sense. You could see any of these kind of upper bracket of drivers, sort of younger drivers, you would say, alongside Rahul's experience landing there. I think a caveat with someone like Rossi, that's obviously won the 500, or someone like VeeKay who's gone well at the 500, is that RLL is still a bit of an unproven quantity at the Speedway. So whether that kind of detracts from the attractiveness compared to other options out there. But yeah, I think Pourchaire would make sense, just when you just kind of thinking logically as to the clear liking they have for drivers that have come over from Europe. But again, who knows?
Who knows? Who should we get on to next? Should we get on to Foyt? Oh, yeah, let's go on to
Foyt. Was next in my list.
Ferrucci's done really well this year at Foyt. They've made a clear step up. I without sounding odd, I think not many teams really want to invest in Ferrucci. But Ferrucci's doing well at Foyt. Foyt are happy with Ferrucci. He's performing well. They've made a clear step up. He doesn't bring budget, which is the only question mark. But if they can sort that out, he's certainly there. I'm almost 100% confident we'll see Ferrucci at Foyt next year. Then the second seat's the question mark. Look, Stingray Rob hasn't had a good year. There's no hiding away from that. But the other side of the equation is he brings the budget. And when you've got a small team like AJ Foyt Racing, that budget can be really significant. I've seen suggestions that maybe he does keep his seat because of the budget that he brings. But again, you don't quite know. As you said, I think Rossi is one who would be a good fit in the fact that he might want another Indy 500 win, and it's another veteran. Like I feel Foyt, you don't need to take it out of the team who really have ever really invested in young drivers in the way, let's say, RLL have. And having two, well, Ferrucci quite young still, but he's experienced, right? So Ferrucci and Rossi could be quite a good combo in some ways. You wouldn't necessarily link a team like Foyt to the likes of, let's say, Pourchaire. But could they take a risk of someone like Lundqvist, for example, or Armstrong, who are also in the market? That's sort of the people who, might always have an outside chance. So, again, I think this one's maybe one of the most unpredictable seats. It's hard to link a certain name because, one, they need the budget in comparison to other teams, and two, Foyt are obviously quite a smaller outfit compared to many. So is it as attractive to some drivers? So there's a lot to think about for this seat. But I feel Rossi could be one, but no one's really been linked to this significantly, so it's hard to work anything out.
What I would say is the landscape at Foyt has changed a lot in the last year. Obviously, there's been an overhaul there with the Penske Alliance, which is clearly, with all of Santino Ferrucci's many top 10 finishes, top 10 in points, it's having an impact, both whether on ovals, where they were already pretty neat sometimes, but certainly on road and street courses. And I think kind of second to that MSR partnered possibly with Ganassi seat, I think this is kind of the second most attractive one out there, possibly, depending how kind of people view the Premier project. But it is the whole budget thing. Again, it was in Marshall Pruitt's latest piece, it was kind of saying if Rob brings the budget, he'll kind of stay. But at the same time, we've got kind of 5 races left now for him to really prove himself, because he has made progress. And, we like him. He's a friend of the podcast, of course. But there are kind of worries with how his performance has stacked up compared to his teammate. He's made progress, but is it enough progress? compared to where that team could be. We came down a bit harsh when Meyer Shank got rid of Tom Blomqvist. However, they bring in David Malukas, and you see that all of a sudden both entries can be on a par. So that's something to watch at Foyt, I would imagine. And I think their 500 strength is a reason why I would see Rossi as probably liking this option. I think this would be a great fit for Rossi. I would really like to see him there. But at the same time, as an Indy 500 winner, does Rossi want to go somewhere where he can be paid? Is that maybe RLL? Is that Prema? That kind of remains to be seen. Again, you look at, I think this would really suit VeeKay as well. It feels like a natural step up from Ed Carpenter Racing. But again, his side pods have been bare on his number 21 Chevy this year with ECR. So, if you get a big name like that, does that attract partners and kind of negate the funding issues? Maybe, but the landscape, the kind of the whole business thing, we don't know the ins and outs of how it all works. But yeah, I mean, Malukas, can HMD support? Could that kind of be a nice bit of middle ground?
So as we know, Alexander Rossi is probably the biggest player in the existing driver market for 2025. That'll obviously mean he's leaving Arrow McLaren end of this year, as previously announced. But if you want to remember his time at Arrow McLaren and get a little Alexander Rossi memento, you can head to Formula Model Shop, because they've got a very special deal on the Alexander Rossi McLaren jersey, yours for $29.99. As we know, it's the best place to get your IndyCar merchandise in the UK and the rest of Europe. Like this one here. Look at this. Tom Blomqvist scale model helmet. It's a 1:2 scale replica. It's got the little strap beneath and everything. It's got all Tom's sponsors and logos on it. I know he's not in the series anymore, but it'd be a rare collector's item in like 50 years' time, so you can sell it onwards. It's got his logo on the side, all the Meyer Shank colours. This is currently only $29.99, the Fallen Model Shop website. Full price, this was about £70. So you're making a huge saving here. This is sort of deals they have on. So get this before it becomes really expensive in like 5 years' time.
And you can use the discount code 5BOMB, all one word, FIVEBOMB, to gain 5% off products on the FMS site. Visit the Instagram highlights on the DIVEBOMB Motorsport Instagram account for links to an exclusive VIP section of the FMS store, courtesy of DIVEBOMB.
And once you've read all the articles on the DIVEBOMB website, you can head to the Formula Model Shop page on the home screen. It's been slightly remodeled this week, so it might look even nicer than it did before. And that's actually a nice little plug. The IndyCar page is slightly updated on their website too, so please check that out.
Stay tuned for exclusive giveaways, events, and other content.
So let's go Juncos. The first bit you need to know is there was a recent test at Worldwide Technology Raceway. Juncos tested Connor Daly as opposed to Canapino, who was expected at the test. That car is currently outside the leader's circle. And obviously Juncos are a small team. They don't have a lot of budget. They don't often have a primary sponsor in their cars. So could that mean Canapino is gone before the end of the season? Daly's an oval veteran. We know that very well. Obviously, he was picked by Coyne Racing to replace Harvey at Iowa. Is there a suggestion maybe that, first of all, Daly comes in the rest of the season? I don't think Daly would get a full-time seat at Juncos next year. But for the rest of the season, that would probably make sense if they are desperately looking at funding. Because Canapino didn't get in the leader circle last year, did he? Or maybe he snuck in.
I can't remember, because there was all that like sort of Laguna Seca last race drama. Wasn't
no, he did. He did, actually, in fairness.
He did. Okay.
But the point still stands. They need the leader circle money. What do they do? I dare I say, I think there's a good chance we see Daly. Again, I said a lot of some of them earlier. You don't test somebody for absolutely no reason. It could just be they want to see how their overall package is, because Daly's got a lot more experience with a lot more teams when it comes to ovals than Canapino does. But do Juncos really want to take that risk of being outside the leader circle? So
they're teetering precariously. It's that kind of, I think they're 5 points outside at the moment, one place. But you've got to be secure. You can't go into the final race with that sort of narrow margin. Again, it just kind of strikes that classic late season thing like we saw with RLL last year when they put Daly in the car for Gateway, I believe it was, because he also he was called upon by Meyer Shank to do the Iowa doubleheader last year, obviously Coyne recently. He'll be in his fourth oval deputy role if he does come in at Juncos for a fourth different team, not even factoring in his one-off Indy 500 with Dreyer and Reinbold. So he's good on ovals, Connor Daly. He's an Iowa pole sitter. He's been in the top 10 at the Indy 500 three years in succession now. He kind of brings that security that, to be fair, Canapino's done all right. Like, I think he qualified 10th for the second Iowa race.
He's just been a bit messy, hasn't he?
Yeah, he qualified 10th in Toronto as well, but it's just the race execution. The first race in Iowa was disappointing. That wasn't his fault, really, but then he obviously spun in the second one, then couldn't get refired. Kind of that just put him out of contention.
And Toronto with Dixon,
yeah, that was
threw himself into the wall.
That was his error. And I mean, I fear it could, if he's out for Gateway, maybe we'll see him in Portland possibly, but it could be the end of Canapino, because obviously there were kind of reports that the funding's dried up from Argentina a bit, and no one even knew if he was going to be back in the car after he missed Road America. So I think it has been a bit of a precarious situation there. So it would make sense if Daly came in, and then kind of beyond that, Devlin DiFrancesco's name has been kind of reported in a few places, I think, simply because he is a driver that brings funding, and that team desperately needs funding. So he could reunite with his old Andretti teammate Roman Grosjean. And, you know, I'm not sure we can, like, Dev's probably a similar level, I guess, to Canapino. Really, we saw the glimpse at the Indy GP late last year that maybe got a few teams looking, but didn't get a seat this year. But again, he's a driver with possible potential and brings money, so it was a move that would make sense.
Yeah, I think Grosjean's had a good enough year to justify staying on Juncos' books for another year, and he's got a bit of experience, doesn't he? And yeah, I mean, DiFrancesco, look, he set the world light for one corner in his IndyCar career, but other than that, he's been pretty anonymous. But as you say, he brings money. There's been suggestions that they're gonna have a bit more significance in the team rather than just driving. I think there was some suggestions of some partial takeover or something along those lines. It's all a bit complicated, but DiFrancesco, I think I said at St. Petersburg, was fairly intent on coming back onto the grid. So again, makes, I guess, sense from his standpoint, from a Juncos standpoint, for a team who desperately needs money. They need it, sort of thing, right? And then you sort of go to Ed Carpenter Racing, another team who are pretty desperate for money. The fact that Rinus VeeKay's car has had no sponsor on it for the majority of the year is concerning in many ways, isn't it? Where, you know, this is a team who need money. Is there a chance they lose VeeKay? Quite possibly. And then what do you do with Rasmussen, who's had an unspectacular year? I guess it depends on VeeKay, doesn't it, a lot? Because I can see Rasmussen going full-time into that seat if VeeKay does go somewhere, and then maybe Carpenter splits somewhere else. Because Paul Rasmussen, he's had a bit of an odd year where he's been a bit messy, but he's had some good moments. You know, he made the Fast 12, didn't he? And had a good race at Mid-Ohio. But he can't stick around in the team forever, where he's only going to be doing 2/3 of the schedule. He'll want to be making that step up to doing a full-time IndyCar schedule. I know recent years we saw Carpenter in that third car. I mean, look, it's not confirmed. Ed might call it a day at some point. He might go to an Indy 500 only entry. That still isn't known, right? I mean, Ed could well step away from all the ovals and just go to Indy 500 sort of thing. You don't know. Yeah. Will he run a third car for himself?
Carpenter's a confusing situation, because I think the third car thing becomes a bit more. There's a bit more jeopardy there if it does become a case that that bumping becomes a thing at regular races. If he was to put on that extra entry with the whole charter system, they're just in a weird situation. I wonder whether he'll see how he performs in these next 4 oval races in the final 5 this season, and then maybe evaluate, because it wouldn't feel fair, especially off what we saw from Rasmussen at the 500, that he would be on a part season schedule again. Because I think personally he's done enough to stay. I know he's had a few messy moments. He's had some bad luck as well. A few just things going a little bit errant, but we've seen his speed recently. I think he's made kind of clear progress. So yeah, maybe they do put him into the VeeKay entry. I personally think VeeKay's time there has kind of run its course a bit. I seem to recall Linus Lundqvist's name was reported with Ed Carpenter Racing last year. So is he an option? I think the issue is there aren't many drivers with bags of funding. You know, you've got Josh Pearson on their books who supposedly has a lot of funding, but he's not ready. That would be to the kind of the detriment of their performance. He's young. He's not really shown enough in Indy NXT yet. So Carpenter for me almost feels like the biggest landing spot for one of the current Ganassi drivers, like Mr. Armstrong. You know, they're good at kind of nurturing young talent. Could it maybe be somewhere that, I don't know, Louis Foster ends up, or Able Motorsports do a partnership with them, or again, maybe that's something that'll happen with Coyne.
Chuck Chadwick there with a bit of money.
And maybe because people will back Chadwick. She's attractive to sponsors for sure. Her story. So yeah, that's really up in the air. Ed Carpenter Racing, I feel, and I think
it depends a lot on VeeKay, right? Because I'm sure they'd love to keep VeeKay on board.
Yeah, but
he's been. I feel it's quite hard because I feel they've been underperforming as a team because VeeKay is a lot less attractive now than he was 2 or 3 years ago from a market standpoint. So does he want to jump ship somewhere as sort of not a last gasp, but to actually say, oh, hang on, I'm better than you estimated me to be?
Yeah, I've got to say, I cannot imagine he'll be pleased with the way this year's gone. The amount of issues that he seems to have had, I think he'll be looking elsewhere. There are steps up, unfortunately, the way that we've seen flashes from Ed Carpenter Racing. I feel like this year has been a little bit better, but I still feel like there are just too many steps up for him personally. But I think it would make things easier if Carpenter maybe went Indy only, but maybe he's not ready for that yet. It's his team. It's his decision.
a lot depends on him as well, doesn't it? Because as I said, for Rasmussen, he wants a full schedule. He can't be going on a partial schedule for years and years and years. And let's say VeeKay leaves and Rasmussen takes a full schedule. Someone like Lundqvist doesn't want to do a part-time schedule. Maybe someone like Foster or Abel would accept it because they've got no other choice. But you can't have two two non-rookie drivers doing part-time schedules because that's not an attractive option.
For sure.
Especially if they've got no funding.
Exactly. I think I would feel fairly confident that Rasmussen, with absolutely nothing to back this up, apart from kind of he's been at the oval races through the year. He wouldn't do that if he wasn't. Still
he did a test as well, didn't he? Recently,
in fact, I think he might have done the gateway test. In fact, because I think that was a part rookie test, part team test, possibly.
I believe so.
So, and he's spoken kind of over the last year about, I'm learning on oval. So that would hint at the fact that he may go to a full season next year. But again, there's nothing to back that up other than kind of inference from what Rasmussen said over the year. I mean, we've kind of said this about a few teams, but maybe Ed Carpenter Racing is the most up in the air in terms of we simply have no idea. At least for teams like RLL, we kind of have a group of names in our mind. For this, we don't know.
Yeah. One, it depends where VeeKay goes, and one depends on what Carpenter, it depends on what Carpenter wants to do. Once we have either of those questions sorted, make it a lot more easier. Let's go Prema. Rossi's name's Rossi's the cork in the bottle in many ways. He's the most attractive option in the entire market for everyone. He's an Indy 500 winner. He's a IndyCar vice champion. He's got 8 wins or whatever to his name. He's got a lot of experience. For Prema, what a recruit that would be. Indy 500 winner, somebody with so much experience to bring into a brand new team. That would be really good for Prema. And his name is being strongly linked with Prema. He could be a good option there. From day one, Prema basically said, we want an experienced driver and a rookie. That leaves VeeKay in a bit of a difficult situation if they sign Rossi. Rookie-wise, we've seen Robert Schwartzman. I think the race reported that Robert Schwartzman was looking at options. He did a test with Ganassi last year. He raced Prema in Formula 3. I believe he was champion of Prema. And then in Formula 2. I can't recall any other. There might be some of the European names linked with them, but Schwartzman was the main one that we've heard.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like Callum Ilot's name has been touted more of as a prediction. I think it's worth just mentioning Ilot because we haven't, and sort of 6 months ago we definitely would have done. I think he's just performed so well in the World Endurance Championship that ultimately he has got better offers, or will have better offers. You know, we don't know for sure, but he probably will have better offers in WEC than he will in IndyCar, and he'll probably be paid better because he's done so well in that customer sort of Jota entry that he will probably have offers from factory teams in the World Endurance Championship.
Next year, Jota look to become a factory team. So the odds are they will get the Cadillac cars in WEC.
Oh, yes.
So that might make it more appealing for Ilot to stay there, being a factory-paid WEC driver. And look, his name hasn't been linked with IndyCar at all. I mean, I live quite close to the Jota factory, so maybe I'll try and hit him up there and find out. But his name hasn't been mentioned at all. And I think he's pretty happy in WEC, as it is, because it's closer to home for him. And WEC, there's more paid options, and your name's almost out there a little bit more. And, you can always return to IndyCar, but he's done so well, as you said, that I think his interest remains in there. It's also worth putting Logan Sargeant's name in this conversation. Sargeant's a really difficult one. We know he's officially gone from Williams. I can't remember how many. It must have been at end of 22, end of 21. End of 21, I think. There was a test he was supposed to have, I believe it was actually with Foyt, before it got cancelled, before he got signed by Williams, interestingly enough. Prema's one which has been touted his name a lot with. He raced for them in F3 back in 2020, and he would fit their sort of requirement as a rookie driver. But in many ways, Sargeant's additional experience in Formula One makes him a lot more attractive. I mean, Schwartzman's got experience in WEC too, so he's just as valuable. Problem is with Sargeant is his management. I think they've contacted 3 or 4 teams. Sargeant wants to be paid rather than bringing funding to a team. And when you're looking at the options like Prema, like Foyt, they can't afford to pay someone like Sargeant. So he's looking at avenues, and I think some team owners have said we're not really interested in him despite the contact. So if he was bringing money, he'd be a lot more valuable. But I think where he's stated explicitly, I'm not bringing money, he's not an attractive option. But Prema and Foyt have been the two which are...
Do we know for sure that Prema they want money for their seats, or will they be paying drivers? Because I have no idea.
I don't know either.
My interpretation was that maybe that would be an option for Rossi or for Sargeant because they might be able to be paid. Because Prema have resources. We know.
I've got no idea, to be honest.
Again, that's not something we really know. So, again, that's another dimension, I guess. But I mean, could there kind of basically saying, oh, we want an experienced driver and a rookie, could that kind of be twisted a little into we want an experienced driver and a young driver? Because someone that I feel like could be someone that would land at Prema is Marcus Armstrong. I just feel like it would make sense. He's raced with Prema again in the F1 ladder. It just feels like if he doesn't have a landing spot, and Robert Schwartzman, again, he's kind of in the Ilott situation. He's racing for the 3rd Ferrari car in WEC, but that is a really competitive entry. Will he want to give that up? And Sargeant leaving F1, it doesn't necessarily mean he has to go to another single-seater championship. He could full well end up in WEC as well, or go to IMSA or something along those lines. I think those options are probably open for him. So it does narrow things down in IndyCar that he wouldn't kind of bring the money, would want to be paid, because Foyt would make a lot of sense. But I don't know, I quite like Prema as sort of a landing spot for VeeKay. I feel like the earlier stage he is in his career feels more of a driver that would fit a project rather than Alexander Rossi, who's not old by any stretch of the imagination, in his early 30s, but he's not at the stage of his career that VeeKay is, for instance. And I feel like Rossi probably would almost be more intent and more suited to having the performance now, which is why even though I'm not even sure I've seen any links to Foyt, but I just really like that as an option for Rossi, given the Penske alliance and everything associated there. And I would think VeeKay would suit Prema quite well. I mean, Sargeant would be cool to see for sure. But then at the same time, yeah, someone like Armstrong, someone like Eilert, it's really kind of up in the air. Prema's almost the blurriest of pictures because we know what they're probably going to do with the experienced driver. We just don't know what they're really going to do with that second seat. So it adds intrigue to us, doesn't it? Not good for trying to prepare for eventualities, but it suits as well. It's exciting.
Right, ready for the most impossible of all impossible challenges. Coyne Racing. We don't know their lineup for this year, let alone next year. So this is a challenge. I mean, I hope for their sake next year isn't the same revolving door of whoever's got budget for 2 or 3 races. I hope it's someone more locked in. But you don't know. This is a team desperate for budget, which obviously makes it a bit different. I can see Jacob Abel in one of these seats. I think he's done good enough in Indy NXT to justify that, and he's got budget. So I feel like for me, they tested him last year. So for me, that makes a bit of sense. Do I see Harvey sticking around? I don't think so. Some of the standouts, some of the sub drivers. You had your likes of Sowery, your likes of McElrea, who seem better than the other ones, but again, they don't bring budget. I mean, Harvey didn't bring huge amounts of budget, in fairness.
He has had a sponsor on the other side of that car, hasn't he, for the year? It's all about just finding that sponsor. I know Sowery's had, I think, Global Karting League. Again, would they support a full season?
McElrea had somebody. The McDonald's franchise, I believe.
Yeah, they've all bought kind of sponsors for these odd races, but will they support a full season is the question.
Yeah, so... Again, it's a whole one because we don't know their plans for. We can guess their plans for this year, but they're not concrete. So with Coyne, the budget is more dependent than it is on any other team. And I feel next year, you hope they just have the stability they didn't have this year. You don't want another revolving door of drivers when you look at a leader circle perspective, because the odds are we probably won't see either of those cars in the leader circle, which is a shame.
Again, it hinges on whether they do go for someone for an entire season in each of their entries, which they need to for the sake of competitiveness. But it's the sad reality of whether they can because of where they are with the whole funding situation. They did in 2023. They had Malukas. They had Rob, of course. So it's possible. I wonder whether we'll see a Jack Harvey-esque driver in the 18, and I don't mean that like somewhere at the stage of their career as Harvey, but someone
like a Daly.
No, I almost mean in terms of the backing that their funding and stuff. I think Louis Foster would suit the 18 car to a T. Really, we've seen over the years they've nurtured young talent really well, and Malukas was competitive in that number 18 car. Like he was by no means uncompetitive for those 2 years. And I just feel like backing someone like Foster, who will come with the scholarship, okay, it won't cover a full season, but it's something. And, he's got Navarra Technologies, I think, have kind of partnered him in Indy NXT. And if you can find a partner, even if you can fund those few races with your scholarship, maybe then a partner will come along and see, oh yeah, this guy's good. And he's done enough to prove he's good by the runaway margin he's had in Indy NXT this year. He's clearly the class of that field. And I think that would have been the case even if Nolan Siegel was still there, because he was kind of dropping back anyway. But it's just a question of whether they can get that financial stability. But I feel like Foster, like the likening him to Harvey is simply the fact that he's not a driver that comes with masses of money. And it's just whether if he can find someone to fund that. And, he said that the scholarship is crucial. He can't really think about IndyCar until he's got that scholarship. And it looks like he will win the championship, barring disaster. That feels like a good landing spot for him. And in the 51. Maybe it's because I'm pretty sure he drives the 51 in Indy NXT, but Jacob Abel, if they can partner with Abel Motorsports, possibly. I don't know whether that's possible, but it's something, and it may give Coyne some stability. And it's a risky lineup. It's 2 rookies, but anything's better than kind of the situation they found themselves in this year. Then you've also got can Elf get Catherine Legg a 4th season? That'd be cool. They've been a really good partner. So is that something that could be possible? Or will we just end up seeing the likes of Luca Giotto coming on one-offs again, which ultimately is to the detriment of the team's competitiveness? So I would love to see a Foster Abel or Foster Legg, something like that. Will it be possible? We don't know.
Should we predict?
Let's predict.
Team Penske, I think, is obviously going to be. I'm writing these down for our sake at the start of next season. Penske, I guess we're going to be both agreed on Newgarden and McLaughlin Power.
Yeah.
McLaren, I presume, we're also going to be agreed on Award Siegel.
We can never be completely sure based on
we can never be completely sure. I mean, we were sure on many wrong things.
I jokes aside, I am pretty certain that. I feel like they are in a stage now where they are.
Andretti, I presume we're all sticking.
Yep.
With Kirkwood, Herta, and Ericsson. And now is where the question marks come in. I feel I'm going to go different to you on many of these. So
yeah, I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's all vibes, isn't it? It's all vibes.
It's all vibes. Let's go RLL next.
Should we just box off Ganassi?
Oh, I forgot about Ganassi. Yeah. Dixon, Ericsson, not Ericsson. I'm still stuck in 2022. Dixon, Palou, Simpson.
Yep.
Yeah, it's dropping down to 3. Let's go RLL. As I said, we'll do them. Ray Hall, Vips, and as my 3rd, I'm gonna go for Pourchaire.
Yeah, I'm going for the same.
It's hard, but yeah, I feel where Pourchaire has been quite closely linked. MSR, I'm going to go for Rossi, Chris Lucas.
I am as well. We're not very different at the moment, are we?
Well, these are the ones where it's a bit easier to predict. It gets a bit more difficult after this. I'll go Juncos because we'll predict the same for this one as well. Di Francesco Grosjean, right?
Yep.
After this, we'll get more interesting, ladies and gents. I hope we haven't turned off yet. Where do we go to next? You pick something.
We do Foyt.
Foyt. Fine. Who are you going to go for?
Well, this is partially because I'd really like to see it, but I'm going to go for Ferrucci and Rossi.
I'm going to go for Ferrucci and Rob. I think he's going to stick around another year.
Yeah, I think it's probable. And you know what? If he can, I've got faith in him. I really want him to succeed.
Let's go. Ooh, let's go. Let's go. We haven't really done most of the teams already. Carpenter.
I'm going to go for Rasmussen and Lundqvist.
Okay. What do you think Carpenter's doing?
I think he might go Indy only. But I think that maybe would be best for the team because he's not going to go for a full season. So
this is the one I'm most stuck on because I can't see VeeKay anywhere else in my mind. So I'm going to go for VeeKay. And then it's what I think they do about the other seat. And this is where it gets difficult. My heart says Lundqvist, but my head says Rasmussen, where you wouldn't be doing all these oval tests for no reason. But you also think about budget. VeeKay's got no budget. Rasmussen, as we know, has got absolutely nothing budget-wise, especially with that scholarship no longer existing. Well, not existing, but he spent it this year.
I don't know where you're going here.
Neither do I, really. So I'm finding this one quite difficult because I can't, Lundqvist doesn't bring funding, for example. Armstrong doesn't bring funding, for example. They need funding from somewhere, but I don't know where. So I'm actually going to go really left field and say Foster. Wow. Instead of Rasmussen, VeeKay, Foster, and maybe Carpenter does a 1 more year splitting it.
Interesting. It would make sense because he brings the scholarship. Exactly. If he's not doing a full season, then it would not be unreasonable.
Prema. This is our 10th team, so we've got Coyne after this. I am going to go for Rossi And then here's hard because I'm going to go Sargeant. I'm going to say Sargeant.
This was really hard. It's Sargeant's such an unknown, and it's a case of he's kind of the only real rookie I can see there, other than Schwartzman. But I don't think he'll ditch his WEC stuff. I'm going to go for VeeKay, and this is a complete toss-up between Sargeant and slightly deviating from their rookie desires. And I think I'm going to say VeeKay and Armstrong.
VeeKay and Armstrong. Viewers, what we'll do is also get Ellie's predictions, and we won't share them, but we'll get them for next week, and we'll put them in whenever we review these in a year's time, whatever. So, just for your information, right? Coyne. Do you
want me to go? Because I'm quite set
you'll
on
go.
Them. I'm going to go for Foster and Abel.
Foster and Abel. I agree on Abel because he brings budget and it makes a lot of sense. The other one I just find so difficult. Because you need someone realistically of funding, or do I think it's going to be another rotating door of drivers, which is the difficult reality? Because, it can't be someone like Lundqvist with no budget. It can't be someone like Rasmussen with no budget. So, could it be a Chadwick seat, for example, where Andretti chuck her in a Coyne? I would feel a bit harsh, though. It's just so difficult. Because I actually don't know. Because do they want the stability, but maybe lack budget, or do they want the rotating door of drivers? Like someone like Daly would probably work fine, but he doesn't really have. Well, does Daly have budget anymore? I don't think so.
Daly, he's got this polka dot backing, but that's getting him the occasional truck race or Xfinity.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, true. I'm going to go for a split entry bout. We're going to see Sauer in that car at some point. We're going to see McElrea in that car at some point. And we will see Legg in that car at some point. That's my prediction. So I'm going to go for the split entry. But I'm not going to be completely useless. I'm going to say I think we'll see Sauer, I think we'll see McElrea, and I think we'll see Legg at some point in the season.
So who misses out in terms? Armstrong misses out for you on a seat.
Armstrong misses out for me. Lundqvist misses out for me. Rasmussen misses out for me. Are the three main ones.
Yeah, it feels harsh, but it might be the harsh reality because that's how racing works, isn't it? Really. For me, Sargeant was kind of my bigger mission, but I can easily see him being in that second premise seat instead of Armstrong.
Lundqvist in it? Not Lundqvist. Lundgaard. Is that the only way we've had lockdown for next year? I believe so.
Probably is, yeah.
Probably so. Which is, I think last year had a bit more. But anyway, we'll bring you those updates as of when they come. We would usually bring you the news point of this segment, but we mentioned the Maloney test, we mentioned Chadwick's test, and that's pretty much
Daly at Juncos as well. Mentioned that.
Daly at Juncos, so it's all happening. If we wanted a bit of off-seasoning, Diff is making his return at the Olympics, so it's quite fun to see him on track and field.
It's no longer IndyCar, though, is it? It's
no longer IndyCar, but he lives in our hearts.
Of course, forever.
If you haven't watched the 4x400 mixed relay, there's a very iconic "Here comes somebody" like he does in IndyCar. So watch that if you haven't already. We'll ignore what happened in the 100 meters. Stop giving him stick for it. It was an honest mistake. I thought the Jamaican guy won. So
did I. We learned that apparently it's your torso that wins you 100 meter, which I didn't know.
Maybe I should know. Which is a bit bizarre. My analogy was you don't decide an IndyCar winner by their helmet. You decide.
I love that analogy. I've used that analogy since.
Yeah, it makes no sense. But anyway, that's how it works. So the poor man picked the wrong guy in the biggest event in the entire Olympics, but we won't give him a stick for it. That's the first big Diff mistake, right? And he's nailed all the other ones. So us and Brits getting our VPNs to watch the Diff commentary for every event, it will live long. And we've only just started the athletics. We're day 3 or 4 of the athletics, so plenty more Diff to watch. So if you haven't been watching Diff already, there's plenty to go. He'll make up for it. He'll make up for his mistake with many other fantastic calls. Best in the business is Mr. Diffie. So hopefully plenty more of him to come. But yeah, there's other than us loving Diff being back on our screens, there is literally no news.
Yeah, I must say thank you to people who have listened to the Simpson F episode. We had some nice responses across social media. So yeah, thank you very much for that. For those of listening, just say stay tuned to the podcast feed.
Yeah, it was a good episode. So very, very enjoyable with Kiffin. And that brings us on nicely to next week. We won't spoil too much, but we will have another driver joining the podcast next week. We'll remain silent on who. You'll have to wait and see in 7 days' time. But there will be another driver on the podcast.
And it should be a good one.
It should be a good one. It should be a good episode. So stay tuned. There should be a very good episode next week with a driver, and hopefully Ellie will be back next week, although I think it'll be about 3 a.m. her time recording. So we'll have to see when that comes. We'll get our predictions in as well for this week. But next week, absolutely thrilling episode. Stay tuned. You'll have a very good interview coming your way next week. But that's all we've got for this week. So first of all, thanks very much for watching. Thanks very much for listening. We appreciate your support as ever. Your feedback is obviously all great to us. So if you have any feedback for the podcast, feel free to send it. We absolutely take it on board.
And please let us know your predictions as well.
Yes, yeah. Please let us know. I mean, you might have something wildly different. There might be something you've completely forgotten about.
As wild and wonderful as they may be, we would love them.
Absolutely. So please stay in tune with us. We're on Instagram. We're on. You can add feedback via Spotify. We're on YouTube. We're on all different channels. But thanks for listening. It's greatly appreciated. As we said, stay tuned next week. It's going to be a great episode. But for this week, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. See you next time.